The rise of civilization is one of the most remarkable and important events in human history. However, it didn't happen one time in one place. It occurred multiple times in multiple locations. Historians and archaeologists have identified 6 distinct civilizations that developed independently of each other, all of which have, in one way or another, contributed to the civilization that we live in today. Learn more about the 6 cradles of civilization, what they were and how they developed, on this episode of Everything Everywhere Daily. This episode is sponsored by Quince. As the weather cools here in Wisconsin, I'm swapping in the pieces that actually get the job done, that are warm, durable, and built to last. And Quince delivers every time, with wardrobe staples that'll carry you through the season. I've told you before about my duvet cover, my blanket, and my black cashmere sweater that I all got on Quince, all of which will be helping me get through this fall and winter. Quince has the kind of staples you'll actually want to wear and repeat, like classic fit denim and real leather and wool outerwear that looks sharp and holds up. By partnering directly with ethical factories and top artisans, Quince cuts out the middleman to deliver premium quality at half the cost of similar brands, and sometimes with even bigger discounts. Layer up this fall with pieces that feel as good as they look. Go to quince.com/daily for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/daily. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/daily. This episode is sponsored by Mint Mobile. If you're a regular listener, you know that I spent over a decade traveling all over the world. During my travels, I would often get mobile plans for my phone, and I noticed that almost everywhere in the world had much, much cheaper phone plans than what we had in the United States. That all changed with Mint Mobile. With Mint, you can get monthly plans that start at just $15 a month. That's why I recommend Mint Mobile. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your own phone number along with your existing contacts. At Mint Mobile, their favorite word is no. No contracts, no monthly bills, no overages, no hidden fees, and no BS. Ready to say yes to saying no? Make the switch at mintmobile.com/EED. That's mintmobile.com/EED. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabits on unlimited plan. Tax and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. This is one of those episodes where I'm revisiting subjects that I've covered or at least mentioned in passing in previous episodes. And I'm examining them from a different perspective by zooming out to try to look at the big picture. The term civilization is a very slippery one because we often use uncivilized as a pejorative. To say that some group of people is uncivilized is somehow to imply that they are lesser than. For the purpose of this episode, I'm going to use the term civilization in a very particular sense. In archaeology and ancient history, a civilization usually means a primary or early state society that built sizable cities, supported occupational specialization on the back of agricultural surplus, developed durable institutions of authority, invested in large public works and monuments, sustained regional trade networks, and encoded information in durable ways such as writing or formal record keeping. Some cultures had many of these traits, but not all of them. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which I covered in a previous episode, was building monumental architecture. But as far as we know, they had no large-scale society, system of writing, or even engaged in agriculture. Polynesian societies had very complex social organizations and engaged in agriculture, but the size of the islands limited the size of their societies, and the materials that they had at hand limited the scope of what they could build. So there isn't some bright line where something is or isn't a civilization. However, when we are discussing ancient history, particularly deep ancient history, the distinction becomes much clearer. Certain societies were much more advanced than others, and that's pretty obvious in the archaeological record. Most archaeologists and ancient historians recognize 6 different places on Earth where advanced civilizations arose independently. That means they almost certainly weren't in contact with one another to spread ideas, at least initially. And while they were all different, they all had broad things in common. These civilizations did not all arise at the same time. There was a gap of sometimes thousands of years between them. So I'll go through the 6 in rough chronological order, starting with the ones that we believe rose first. And the first of these is in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, meaning the land between the rivers, lies in the fertile plain created by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Seasonal floods deposited rich silt but were unpredictable, requiring organized irrigation. By the 7th millennium BC, Neolithic farmers cultivated wheat and barley, domesticated sheep and goats, and lived in permanent villages. Over the centuries, irrigation canals and collective labor allowed populations to grow and concentrate. The Ubaid era, from approximately 6500 to 3800 BC, marks the beginning of large proto-urban communities. Small villages expanded into larger settlements, featuring central temples that served both religious and economic purposes. These temples coordinated irrigation, food storage, and redistribution, establishing the link between religious authority and financial power that would define Mesopotamian life. The city of Uruk is believed to have been the world's first true metropolis around 3800 BC, with a population of tens of thousands. Here, cuneiform writing was invented to keep track of rations, trade, and temple accounts. Cylinder seals, ration tokens, and numerical tablets show the rapid development of bureaucracy. This period saw the emergence of full-time specialists, including scribes, potters, weavers, and merchants. In 2334 BC, Sargon of Akkad created the world's first known empire, uniting Sumerian city-states under centralized rule. Akkadian became a lingua franca, and imperial administration spread Mesopotamian ideas across the Near East. The empire eventually collapsed due to internal strife and pressure from outside groups, but it established a model of empire for millennia to come. The next great civilization to emerge was the Egyptian civilization, located along the banks of the Nile River in Africa. Conditions in Egypt were very similar to those in Mesopotamia. The Nile was a river that regularly flooded, creating fertile soil along its banks. It was a long ribbon of agriculture surrounded by an enormous expanse of impassable desert. This natural bounty supported population growth and gave rise to a central authority that managed flood cycles, food storage, and canal maintenance. By the 5th and 4th millennia BC, farming villages lined the Nile. Distinct cultural zones developed in Upper Egypt and in Lower Egypt. Upper Egypt produced powerful chieftains who increasingly consolidated territory, while Lower Egypt's delta saw more dispersed settlements. Archaeology shows rising social stratification with elaborate burials, regional craft specializations, and symbols of authority appearing in both regions. Tradition holds that King Narmer unified Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BC. The Narmer palette depicts him wearing both crowns, symbolizing the unification. A new capital at Memphis allowed control of both the north and the south. Kingship emerged as the central institution, portraying the pharaoh as a divine ruler who upheld Ma'at, or the cosmic order. Writing in the form of hieroglyphics developed around this time, primarily for recording royal and religious matters. The Old Kingdom era, from approximately 2686 to 2181 BC, is often called Egypt's Age of Pyramids. Pharaohs like Djoser and Khufu mobilized enormous resources for monumental projects. A centralized state bureaucracy oversaw taxation, forced labor, and food redistribution. The Nile's abundance allowed surplus wealth to flow into religion, art, and architecture. Both Mesopotamia and Egypt influenced other cultures that adopted their ideas and developed complex civilizations on their own, such as the Greeks and the Nubians. The third cradle of civilization is one I haven't mentioned much on this podcast, but hope to address in the future: the Indus Valley Civilization. Centered in the floodplains of the Indus River and its tributaries, the region encompassed present-day Pakistan and northwest India. Fertile soil supplemented by seasonal flooding and irrigation supported wheat, barley, cotton, and other crops. By the Neolithic Mehrgar culture from the 7th to 5th millennium BC, farming, herding, and early craft production were firmly established, laying the foundation for later urban life. Small farming villages gradually grew into larger settlements with regional trade networks. Pottery, metallurgy, and bread making flourished, and standardized weights and measures began to appear. Increasing social complexity is evident in larger communal buildings, organized layouts, and fortified sites, suggesting the beginnings of urban planning and political authority. The mature Harappan phase from 2600 to 1900 BC was the high point of the Indus civilization. Great cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and Lothal were established. These cities were remarkable for their planned grid-like street systems, standardized baked bricks, elaborate drainage and sewage networks, and large public structures such as granaries and baths. Seals with animal images and inscriptions represent a still undeciphered script indicating some form of administration. The Indus Valley Civilization was the largest Bronze Age urban culture by area, spanning over 1 million square kilometers. The fourth civilization to arrive was the ancient Chinese civilization of the Yellow River Basin. The 3 previous civilizations all managed to eventually connect and trade with each other, as the distances between them weren't vast. China, on the other hand, was much more isolated. The Yellow River in northern China provided fertile soil ideal for millet cultivation, although it, too, was also prone to devastating floods. Early Neolithic cultures such as Yangshao from 5000 to 3000 BC and Longshan from 3000 to 1900 BC pioneered settled farming villages, fine pottery, silk weaving, and increasingly stratified social structures. The Longshan culture in particular exhibits defensive walls, ritual bronzes, and evidence of conflict, foreshadowing the rise of urban centers. The Shang dynasty period from 1600 to 1046 BC marks the first unequivocally documented dynasty in Chinese history. Its capitals, such as Zhongzhou and later Anyang, contained palaces, workshops, and monumental ritual spaces. Shang elites developed advanced bronze casting for weapons and ritual vessels, a hallmark of their culture. Most significant was the emergence of writing. Oracle bone inscriptions used for divination represent the earliest form of Chinese script and a direct ancestor of modern Chinese characters. The Shang king ruled both as a political leader and a religious intermediary, emphasizing ancestor worship and communication with the spirit world. Something you'll have noticed about all 4 of the Old World civilizations that I've covered so far is that they followed a relatively similar story. They developed along the shores of fertile rivers, which enabled a large agricultural surplus, in turn supporting large populations, cities, and specialized non-agricultural jobs. The complex societies necessitated the development of writing systems to help organize everything, and this also allowed for a level of societal coordination that enabled the construction of massive structures and cities. The rivers also facilitated easy navigation and the transportation of goods. The final 2 civilizations emerged in very different locations and under vastly different circumstances. The next civilization to arise was the Mesoamerican civilization, located in present-day Mexico and Central America. The basis of Mesoamerican civilization was maize or corn agriculture, complemented by beans, squash, chili peppers, and later cacao. Farming began in small villages about 2000 BC, which supported growing populations. As agriculture became more reliable, permanent settlements spread throughout the highlands and lowlands, with villagers experimenting with pottery, weaving, and religious rituals. By this time, regional chieftains began to emerge, with larger villages featuring ceremonial platforms and public architecture. Social hierarchies grew visible in burials and artwork. Early cultic symbols such as jaguars, rain, and fertility hinted at a religious framework that would endure throughout Mesoamerican history. Unlike the previous civilizations, Mesoamerican civilization did not arise along the banks of a single fertile river. The Olmec, which existed from 1200 to 400 BC, centered in the Gulf Coast lowlands, the location of modern-day Veracruz and Tabasco, and it's often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. They built monumental centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta with massive earthen mounds, plazas, and colossal basalt heads representing rulers. The Olmec pioneered long-distance trade networks, moving jade, obsidian, and serpentine. Iconography suggests complex religion, shamanistic kingships, and ritual ball games. Some scholars argue that the earliest forms of writing are represented here, although writing is unambiguously attested later amongst the Maya. The Olmec provided the earliest fully urbanized examples in the region, influencing later great civilizations such as the Maya, Zapotec, Teotihuacan, Toltec, and Aztec. The fact that an ocean separated Mesoamerica from the other early civilizations lends credence to the idea that this is something all human societies were capable of if they managed to reach certain levels of agricultural production and population. The sixth and final place, considered to be a cradle of civilization, takes us to yet another continent and a very different landscape: Peru. Geography played a decisive role in Peru. The narrow desert valleys along Peru's Pacific coast, watered by short rivers from the Andes, created fertile oases amidst an arid landscape. Communities combined irrigated farming of cotton and gourds with rich maritime resources such as anchovies, enabling large populations to thrive. Around 3500 BC, the Norte Chico, or Carl Supe culture, had developed monumental architecture, relying on textiles, fishing, and communal labor rather than ceramics or grain staples. Corral and related sites showed platform mounds, sunken plazas, planned neighborhoods, and evidence of music and ritual. These early cities reflect organized labor, social stratification, and centralized leadership. Cotton for nets and clothing exchanged with coastal fish underpinned the economy. As new centers emerged in the highlands, Chavin de Huantar became a hub of religious and artistic influence. Its cult imagery featuring jaguars, eagles, and snakes spread widely, unifying disparate groups in the Andes through shared symbolism. Irrigation, ceramics, and metallurgy advanced, and long-distance exchange networks linked the coasts to the highlands. After Chavin, regional cultures such as the Moche, Nacha, Sican, and Chimu developed irrigation canals, adobe pyramids, fine textiles, and advanced metalworking techniques. These states governed valley systems, developed complex social hierarchies, and expanded trade. The Chimu capital of Chanchan showed large-scale urban planning well before the Incas. By the 15th century, the Inca had consolidated earlier Andean innovations such as terrace farming, irrigation, roads, storage systems, and quipu accounting into a vast empire. These institutions had deep roots in the coastal and highland societies that had arose over the previous 3,000 years. And quipu was a system that used knotted cords, not the writing of characters, on a surface. The Andean civilizations were altogether different from those that arose elsewhere in terms of the foods that they produced, their origins, and the system of communications that were developed. While these six civilizations differed from one another and from our modern world, they were the ones who laid the foundation for the world that we live in today. The executive producer of Everything Everywhere Daily is Charles Daniel. The associate producers are Austin Oetken and Cameron Kieffer. My big thanks go to everyone who supports the show over on Patreon. Your support helps make this podcast possible. And I also want to remind everyone about the community groups on Facebook and Discord. That's where everything happens that's outside the podcast, and links to those are available in the show notes. As always, if you leave a review on any major podcast app or in the above community groups, you too can have it read on the show.